My son accidentally sent me a voice note meant for his wife. What I heard led me to change my $5.7 million will. Those were the words I never thought would come out of my mouth. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell anyone. And if, for even a second, this sounds familiar to you, all I ask is that you hit the like button and subscribe. It will help me to keep getting this off my chest. My name is Rose Miller. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a little house with a patio full of bougainvillea in the King William district of San Antonio. My hands are marked by years of baking pies since 4 in the morning, of cleaning other people's houses under the hot Texas sun, of counting every penny so my children could get an education. Every wrinkle on my face tells the story of a woman who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had just finished watering the plants on the patio when I felt the vibration of my cell phone in my apron pocket. The device felt too modern for my trembling hands. Julian, my eldest son, had given it to me, saying it was time for me to join the 21st century. I picked it up carefully, as always, afraid of breaking it. The notification read, "Voice note from Julian for Claire." My heart leaped with joy. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I figured he'd made a mistake and sent me a loving message meant for his wife. How sweet, I thought. My son is still a romantic, just like his father. I tapped the play button, not knowing that those 30 seconds would forever change the way I saw the person I had carried for 9 months. "Get ready, the old woman is here again with her drama," I heard Julian's voice, in a tone he had never used with me. "You know the drill. Just smile a little and she'll try to win you over with some soup and a story from the 70s. Pathetic. She can't stand being alone and wants to come cry on our shoulders again. But don't worry, she won't stay long." The world stopped. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the patio tiles with a dry crack. The bougainvillea seemed to turn gray, as if all the life had been drained from the garden I loved so much. That voice. The same voice that used to shout, "Mommy," when he had nightmares at 5 years old. The voice that told me, "You're the best mom in the world," when I brought him hot grilled cheese sandwiches at school. The voice that cried while hugging me at his father's funeral, promising he would never leave me alone. Now he was calling me the old woman and pathetic. I sat down in the plastic chair where I had breakfast every morning, watching my geraniums grow. My legs wouldn't support me. My chest burned as if I'd swallowed hot coals. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and listened to the audio again. Once, twice, 3 times, hoping my ears had deceived me, that the pain was making me hear things that weren't there. But no, it was real. My son, my Julian, the boy I had breastfed for 2 years because we couldn't afford formula, was talking about me as if I were a plague, a nuisance, something to be gotten rid of quickly. The air grew thick. The smell of coffee that always filled my kitchen made me nauseous. For the first time in years, I couldn't finish my breakfast. The scrambled eggs grew cold on the plate as I sat motionless, trying to process that the man I trusted most in this world saw me as a burden. I remembered the last time I had gone to his house. I had prepared my famous beef stew the night before, following my mother-in-law's recipe, using the rolling pin I inherited from my mother. I arrived at his door with the steaming pot, filled with the hope of sharing a family meal. Claire, his wife, greeted me with a smile I now understood was completely fake. "Oh, Rose, what a surprise," she had said, but her eyes were looking elsewhere. "Julian is busy, but you can just leave the food." She didn't even invite me in, didn't even offer me a glass of water. The whole way home I had felt strange, as if I had done something wrong. Now I understood why. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply existed. And apparently for them, my existence was an inconvenience. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my bed, the same one where I had given birth to my 2 children because we couldn't afford the hospital. The walls of my bedroom were covered in photos. Julian at his first communion, smiling at me with his crooked teeth. Julian at his college graduation, lifting me up because he said I was the reason for his success. Julian with Claire on their wedding day, introducing her to me as the most important woman in my life after my mother. When had everything changed? At what point had I become the pathetic old woman who was only good for pity? The next day, as I swept the patio like I had every morning for 40 years, I remembered the words my mother told me before she died. Rose, sometimes children forget where they came from once they get where they're going. I didn't understand what she meant then. Now I understood perfectly. The sun beat down on the patio tiles, warming the face that had aged, sacrificing every dollar for my children's future. For the first time in my life, I wondered if all the sacrifice had been worth it, only to be seen as an embarrassment. And for the first time in 63 years, a dangerous question began to form in my mind. What if I don't have to put up with this anymore? The tears had dried on my cheeks, but the burning in my chest was still there. I got up from the patio chair and walked to my bedroom, where I kept the wooden box that had belonged to my husband, Thomas. My fingers, swollen from so many years of work, trembled as I opened the lid. Inside were all the receipts, all the proof of what my life had been for the last 15 years. Receipts for Julian's university tuition, 2 degrees because he didn't like the first one, over $100,000 that I paid for by selling pies at dawn and cleaning houses in the afternoons. I would get up at 3 in the morning to have 300 pies ready before sunrise. My hands would be red and swollen from kneading so much dough. But when Julian would call me from Austin saying, "Mom, I need money for books," I would smile and send him every last cent. Here was the receipt from the orthodontist when Claire needed braces. $5,000. Julian had told me it was urgent because she couldn't smile in the wedding photos. I pawned the gold earrings Thomas had given me for our anniversary. The same earrings Claire now knew I had sold for her perfect teeth. Receipt after receipt. The rent for his first apartment when he graduated because he needed time to find a job. The down payment on his car because he couldn't get a good job without a car. The furniture for their house because it was time to build a life. All paid for with my savings, with my widow's pension, with the extra cash I earned cleaning houses for the rich ladies in Alamo Heights. I found a crumpled piece of paper. It was a letter I had written to Thomas after he died, when I didn't know how I was going to raise the kids alone. "My love," it said in my shaky handwriting, "I promise our children will have everything we couldn't give them. They'll go to college. They'll be professionals. They'll live better than us. I swear it on your soul." And I had kept my promise. Julian was a civil engineer, had his own house in an upper-middle-class suburb. His wife worked at a marketing firm. They drove 2 cars. Everything I had dreamed of for him. But apparently, at some point in that social climb, I had become a burden, an uncomfortable reminder of his humble origins. The phone rang. It was Leah, my younger daughter. "Mom, how are you? You sound strange." Leah lived in Denver, working as an elementary school teacher. She had always been more affectionate than Julian, but lately, she had also become distant. Our conversations had been reduced to quick calls where she would tell me about money problems, and I, as always, would offer to help. "I'm fine, sweetie. How are things out there?" "Oh, Mom, it's rough. A teacher's salary doesn't go very far. And you know Rick is still struggling to find steady work. The rent is due and I don't know what to do." There it was, the real reason for the call, as always. "How much do you need?" I didn't want to ask, but it's $1,500. If I don't pay this week, they're going to evict us. $1,500, almost half of my monthly pension. But I had already said yes before she finished explaining, as always. Every time my children needed me, or rather, when they needed my money. "I'll deposit it tomorrow, sweetie." "Oh, Mom, you're an angel. I honestly don't know what we'd do without you." An angel. That word stuck in me like a thorn. Was I an angel, or just a damned fool? Because angels don't expect emotional payment. Angels give without expecting anything. But I was starting to realize that I did expect something. I expected respect. I expected to be seen as a person, not a walking ATM. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table where I had done so many calculations, where I had divided my meager income between my children's needs and my own, which were always at the bottom of the list. The table was scratched from years of use. Thomas had made it with his own hands when we got married. "So you can eat like a queen," he had told me. How ironic. I had eaten like a pauper for most of my adult life, so my children could eat like kings. I remembered the time Julian had invited me to a fancy restaurant for my birthday. I had arrived in my prettiest dress, the navy blue one I'd bought at Goodwill. All the other women were wearing clothes that cost more than my entire monthly pension. Throughout the meal, Julian seemed embarrassed. He corrected me when I spoke loudly, handed me napkins when I didn't even need them, asked me to speak more softly. "Mom, you have to mind your manners. This is a nice place. A nice place." As if I were an old piece of furniture that clashed with the modern decor. As if my 70 years of life hadn't been enough to learn how to behave. As if the woman who had raised him wasn't good enough to be by his side in public. Claire had spent the entire dinner looking at her phone, barely touching her food, sighing every time I told an anecdote from when Julian was a boy. "Oh, Rose, always the same stories," she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That night, when I got home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I truly saw myself for the first time in years. My white hair, badly cut because I went to the cheapest salon in the neighborhood. My skin wrinkled from the sun and work. My simple, old clothes. My incomplete set of teeth because I never had the money to get them fixed. Was that what my children saw when they looked at me? A poor, pathetic old woman who reminded them of where they came from? The next day, I went to the bank to deposit Leah's money. The teller knew me because I came every month to make the same kind of transactions. Always withdrawals. Never deposits. "Everything okay, Mrs. Rose? You look worried." "Everything's fine, honey. Just tired." But it wasn't fine. While I waited in line, I watched the other people. Women my age accompanied by their children, who helped them with the paperwork, who treated them with kindness and patience. I saw a young man explaining something to his mother with a smile, unhurried, unashamed. I saw a granddaughter hugging her grandmother after helping her cash her pension check. And I was there alone, as always, making transfers for children who only called me when they needed money. That afternoon, while I prepared the dinner I would eat alone in front of the television, a thought chilled me to the bone. In the last 5 years, how many times had I been with my children without money being involved? How many conversations had we had that didn't end with them asking me for something? The answer was terrifying. None. Every call, every visit, every "How are you, Mom?" was followed by a financial need. Julian needed money to remodel the kitchen. Leah needed money for the kids' school registration. Claire needed money for a cosmetic procedure that was urgent for her self-esteem. And I had given, and given, and given, until I became what I had heard in that audio note, the pathetic old woman who was only good for crying and giving money. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed my children, where I had comforted them when they cried, where I had read them stories before bed. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question that terrified me. What would happen if I no longer had money to give them? Would they still call me? Would they still be my children if I wasn't their benefactor? The silence of my house gave me the answer I feared most. On Friday, my 64th birthday arrived. I had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Not because I was excited about the accumulating years, but because I hoped my children would remember. That maybe, for one day, I would be more than a source of money. That I would be their mother. I got up early, as always, but this time I got ready with more care. I put on the green dress I had saved for special occasions, put on a little lipstick I bought once a year at the local drugstore. I tied my gray hair back with a headband that had belonged to my mother. I looked presentable. I looked like a woman who deserved to be celebrated. I brewed coffee on the stovetop, the old-fashioned way Thomas liked it, and sat on the patio to wait. The phone was next to me on the plastic table. At 8 in the morning, I started checking my messages. Nothing. At 9, I checked again. Nothing. At noon, when the sun was beating down and the bougainvillea seemed to wilt from the heat, I was still waiting. Mrs. Carmen, my neighbor, peeked over the wall that divided our patios. "Happy birthday, Rose. Have the kids called yet?" "Not yet, but they will soon," I lied with a smile that hurt my face. Of course. They're probably planning a surprise for you." A surprise? Yes. The surprise was that for my own children, the day I came into this world wasn't worth a 2-minute phone call. At 5 in the afternoon, my pride gave up. I called Julian. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. His cheerful voice told me to leave a message. I hung up without saying anything. I called Leah. Same result. That night I ate a cupcake I had bought at the bakery all by myself. It was one of those cheap ones with artificial frosting that tasted like chemicals and pink dye that stained my fingers. As I chewed in silence, looking at the photos of past birthdays hanging on the living room wall, I understood something that broke my soul. They didn't even know what day it was. It wasn't that they had decided to ignore me. It was that I simply didn't exist on their mental calendars. I wasn't important enough for them to remember the date I had come into the world to give them life. On Saturday morning, Julian finally called me back. "Mom, I saw you called yesterday. Is everything okay?" "It was my birthday," I said, my voice sounding small even to me. Silence. A silence so long I thought the call had dropped. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. It completely slipped my mind. We're just so swamped with work and, well, you know how it is. I'll make it up to you, okay? Next time I'm over, I'll bring you something nice." "Next time you're over," I repeated. "When will that be?" "Well, I don't know, as soon as I can. We've got a lot of projects right now. But we talked, right? We talked." As if those 3 minutes of awkward conversation were enough to make up for 364 days of absence. "Yes, son, we talked." I hung up and stood there, phone in hand, feeling something inside me crumble. It wasn't just that they had forgotten my birthday. It was that they didn't even pretend well when I confronted them. It was that they just didn't care. The following week, I got sick. A bad flu that left me with a fever and chills. My body ached as if I'd been beaten. I couldn't get out of bed without the room spinning. For the first 2 days, I tried to take care of myself as I always had. I drank lemon tea with honey, wrapped myself in blankets, and waited for it to pass. But on Wednesday, the fever got so high that Mrs. Carmen got worried when she didn't see me watering my plants as I did every morning. "Rose, are you okay? I haven't seen you. I'm a little under the weather, neighbor, but I'll be fine. Have you told your kids? You need someone to look after you. You need someone to look after you." What a strange concept. I had looked after so many people in my life. My husband when he had pneumonia. My children when they had fevers. My mother-in-law when she could no longer care for herself. But now that I needed care, I had no idea how to ask for it. I called Julian. Voicemail. I sent him a WhatsApp message. "Son, I'm very sick. Could you come see me?" He saw the message. The 2 blue check marks confirmed it, but he didn't reply. I waited all day. Every time I heard a car drive down the street, my heart leaped, hoping it was him. But he didn't come. The next day, I called Leah. "Mom, what's wrong? I heard you're sick." "Who told you?" "Julian. He sent me a message saying you'd texted him that you were feeling bad." So he had seen my message, and instead of coming, he had passed the problem on to his sister, as if I were a responsibility that could be delegated. "I'm very sick, sweetie. A high fever. I can't get up." "Oh, Mom, that's terrible. But I'm in Denver. I can't help you. Don't you have a neighbor who could run errands for you?" A neighbor? My neighbors, who barely knew me, were supposed to take care of me because my own children couldn't. "Don't worry, honey. I'll get better. Take care of yourself, Mom. And if you need anything, just call me, okay?" But we both knew there was nothing she could do from Denver. It was just a polite phrase, a nice way of saying, "It's not my problem." It was Mrs. Carmen who saved me that week. She, a woman who knew me only because we shared a wall, was the one who took me to the doctor, who bought my medicine, who made me chicken soup and stayed to make sure I ate it. A stranger took better care of me than my own children. "Why are you doing this for me?" I asked her one afternoon as she gave me my pills. "Because we're alone, Rose. Women who are alone have to look out for each other. We're alone." Those 2 words stayed with me. I had spent my whole life surrounded by family, raising children, caring for a husband, being the center of a home. But now I understood that I had been alone for years without realizing it, that the family I had built with so much love no longer truly included me, that I was an outsider, tolerated out of obligation and contacted out of need. When I finally recovered, Julian came to visit. He arrived on a Sunday afternoon with Claire and a bag of oranges. "How are you, Mom? You look better." He looked uncomfortable, as if being in my house was an unpleasant duty he had to fulfill to keep up appearances. "I'm fine, son. Thanks for coming." "Oh, sorry I didn't come sooner. But you know how work is. We can't afford to get sick." They couldn't afford to get sick. But apparently they could afford to let their mother be alone, feverish. With no one to care for her, Claire stood in the doorway, looking at her phone. She didn't even come over to say hello. When I tried to offer them coffee, she said they were in a hurry. "We don't want to catch anything," she said with a fake smile. "We should probably get going." 15 minutes. That's how long the visit lasted. 15 minutes after a week in which I thought I might die alone. When they left, I sat in my armchair and cried. But I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from rage. Rage at myself for expecting anything different. Rage for believing that a mother's love was automatically returned. Rage for being such a damned fool to think that giving everything meant receiving something. That night, as I tidied the house that had been neglected during my illness, I found an old photo of when the kids were little. We were at the neighborhood park, the three of us huddled together, smiling. Julian was about 8 and had his arm around my waist. Leah, 5, was sitting on my lap. They were both looking at me as if I were the most important thing in the world. When had I stopped being that? When exactly had I gone from being their mom to being the pathetic old woman? I put the photo away in a drawer, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe it was time to stop expecting, to stop hurting, to stop giving so much to those who gave me so little. Maybe it was time to learn how to be truly alone, because being surrounded by family who ignores you hurts more than being completely alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, while cleaning Julian's room that I had kept untouched since he left home, that I found something that chilled me to the bone. Behind his college textbooks, which I had paid for one by one, was a folder full of papers. At first I thought they were old-school documents, but when I opened it, I discovered something that changed the way I saw my son forever. They were emails. Printouts of conversations he'd had with Claire for the past 3 years. He had saved them like trophies, evidence of something that hurt me to my very bones to read. "Claire, my mom gave me the money for your procedure again. She's so desperate to feel useful. She doesn't even ask what it's really for. You know, just give her a little affection and she melts. It's pathetic, but useful." I sat on the bed where he had slept for 18 years, where I had stayed up late caring for him when he had a fever, where I had read him stories until he fell asleep. My hands trembled as I held that paper, which felt like a knife straight to the heart. There was another email, dated last year. "I don't understand why my mom insists on coming over so much. I've told her 1,000,000 times we're busy, but she's so stubborn. Yesterday she showed up with that awful stew she makes, all greasy, and I had to pretend I liked it. She just stands there waiting for you to tell her it's delicious, like a little kid waiting for approval. It's so embarrassing. Awful stew. The same stew he used to beg me to make when he was sick. The same recipe I had learned from my mother-in-law, that I had perfected over years, that I made especially for him because he said it was his favorite. Now it turned out he was just pretending to like it. I kept reading, even though each word was like swallowing crushed glass. "Claire, I think it's time we limit my mom's visits. She's getting really dependent and clingy. Besides, every time she comes over, you can tell she doesn't fit into our new life. The neighbors are going to think we're trashy if they see her showing up in her Goodwill clothes." My Goodwill clothes. The same clothes I had worked in for years to pay for his education. The same clothes I wore because every dollar I saved on dressing nicely was a dollar I could give him so he could live better. But the email that shattered me the most was at the bottom of the folder. It was recent, from just 2 months ago. I already talked to Leah. We both agree that Mom is getting to be too much. She's always on about her loneliness, as if we're responsible for entertaining her. We've done our part by paying her medical bills when she gets sick and answering the phone once in a while. She can't expect us to be her friends, too. The plan is to slowly distance ourselves. It's not like she'll notice. She's so naive. The plan. They had made a plan to push me away. My 2 children, the human beings I had loved most in my life, had sat down together to plan how to gradually get rid of me. And the cruelest part, it's not like she'll notice. She's so naive. I sat there, in that room full of memories, surrounded by the books I had bought, on the bed whose sheets I had changed thousands of times, holding the evidence that my unconditional love had been seen as pathetic naivety. The phone rang. It was Leah. "Mom, how are you? You sound strange." "I'm perfect," I lied. though my voice sounded broken even to me. "Oh, good. Hey, remember I told you about Sophia's dance school? Well, it turns out they need new uniforms and—" "No," I said. Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, no, Mom? I'm not giving you money for the dance uniform." "But why? You always help us. Did something happen?" "You always help us." As if it were my obligation. As if after 64 years of giving, I didn't have the right to say no. "Nothing happened. I simply don't want to." "Mom? Are you feeling okay? You're talking really strangely. This isn't like you." "Not like me? Who was I then? The woman who said yes to everything? The one who gave money without asking questions? The one who pretended not to notice that her own children had made a plan to push her away? I'm perfectly fine. I'm just tired." "Well, just think about it, okay? The little one is so excited about her classes." I hung up without another word. It was the first time in my life I had denied either of my children anything, and strangely, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up reading those emails over and over, memorizing every cruel word, every jab, every piece of evidence that I had been a fool for years. But more than pain, what I felt was a strange clarity, like when you walk out of a dark room and your eyes finally adjust to the light. The next day, Julian showed up unannounced. He looked annoyed, nervous. Claire was with him, which almost never happened. "Mom, Leah told me you said no about the uniform. What's going on? Are you mad about something?" I looked at the two of them standing in my living room, in the house I maintained with my pension, surrounded by the furniture I had bought piece by piece, and I felt something I had never experienced before: contempt. "I'm not angry," I said with a calmness that surprised me. "I'm just awake." "Awake to what?" I went to my bedroom and came back with the folder of emails. I placed it on the coffee table, the same table where we had eaten breakfast together when they were children. To this. Julian turned pale. Claire's face went beet red. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what? That my stew is awful and greasy? That my Goodwill clothes embarrass you? That I'm pathetic but useful? That you made a plan to push me away because I'm too much?" The words came out of my mouth with a coldness I didn't know I possessed. It was as if someone else were speaking, someone who was no longer afraid to face the truth. "Mom, I wrote those things when I was angry. I didn't mean them." "Which of the many times you were angry, Julian? When you said you pretended to like my food? When you agreed with your sister that I was too naive to notice your plans?" Claire tried to intervene. "Rose, sometimes people say things—" "Be quiet," I said, my voice not my own. "You have no right to speak in my house. You have no right to have an opinion about the woman who paid for your perfect teeth." A silence so thick you could cut it settled over the room. Julian looked desperate, searching for the right words to fix what had just been broken forever. "Mom, forgive me. I'm serious. You know what hurts the most, Julian? It's not that you see me as pathetic. It's not that you're ashamed of me. What hurts the most is that you were right. I was so naive that I thought unconditional love would be returned. So naive that I believed giving everything meant receiving something." I stood up and walked to the door. "But I'm not naive anymore. I'm not the stupid old fool who doesn't notice anything. Mom, please. The visit is over. Leave. We can't end the conversation like this." "Conversation? When have we ever had a real conversation, Julian? When have you ever talked to me about anything other than asking for money or faking politeness?" They left without another word. Claire practically ran to the car, while Julian looked back at me from the sidewalk as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. That night, as I put the emails in a safe place, I realized something had changed in me forever. I was no longer the woman who waited for crumbs of love. I was no longer the one who gave everything without question. For the first time in 64 years, I had set a boundary. And though it hurt, it also felt like waking up from a very long dream. The next day when the phone rang, I didn't run to answer it as I had my whole life. I let it ring. And ring, and ring. Because I was no longer the woman who was available 24/7 for anyone who wanted to use her. I was no longer the pathetic old woman. I was Rose Miller. And for the first time in decades, I was going to start acting like it. The following days were a hurricane of calls, texts, and desperate pleas that confirmed something I had already begun to suspect. My children didn't miss me. They missed my wallet. The phone rang nonstop. Julian called me every hour. Leah sent long messages full of justifications. Even Claire, who had never spoken to me directly, sent me a WhatsApp message that started with "Dearest Rose" and ended by explaining the emails were a misunderstanding. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. Every call I didn't answer, every message I read without replying, made me feel stronger. It was as if I had been carrying a backpack full of rocks for years and had finally taken it off. On Friday morning, as I was watering my plants like I had for decades, Julian appeared at my door. He didn't knock. He had keys, the same keys I had given him when he got married, in case of an emergency. He walked in as if nothing had changed, as if he had the right to be there after what I had discovered. "Mom, we need to talk." "You were supposed to knock," I said without looking at him, focusing on my geraniums. "This is my house, not yours." "But I always just walk in." "Things have changed, Julian." He looked desperate. He had dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, which was rare for him, always so concerned with his appearance. "Mom, please listen to me. I need to explain." "Explain what? That for 3 years you've been laughing at me with your wife? That my food disgusts you but you pretend to like it? That you're embarrassed to be seen with me? That's not it. You're misinterpreting everything." For the first time in my life, I laughed at my son. A dry, humorless laugh that made him step back as if I'd slapped him. "Misinterpreting? Julian, I have your words in writing. Dated. There is nothing to misinterpret." He sat down in my armchair, the same one where I had nursed him, where I had patched up his scraped knees, where I had listened to his teenage problems. But now he looked like a stranger in my living room. "Okay, fine, I wrote those things. But it was because I was frustrated. Claire is always complaining that you come over too much, Claire complains that I come over too much. Your wife decides when I can see my son? That's not it, Mom. It's just, well, we're married now. We have our own life. We can't be looking after you all the time." "All the time? Julian, we see each other once a month. I call you twice a week. Is that all the time to you?" "Well, no, but..." "But what?" "It's just that you always need something. You always have some drama. You always want us to pay attention to you." Drama. That word hit me like a slap. My loneliness was drama. My need to see my children was drama. My mother's love was drama. You know what my biggest drama has been, Julian? Raising an ungrateful son who sees me as a burden. He turned red, but not from shame. From anger. "Oh, there it is. Now you're calling me ungrateful. As if I've never done anything for you. What have you done for me, Julian? I paid for your surgery last year, with the money I had lent you 2 months earlier for your car. I visit you, once a month, for 15 minutes. Only when you need something. I call you, to ask for money." He fell silent because he knew I was right. Every point he made, I could rebut with facts, because I had been keeping a mental tally without even realizing it, of every crumb of attention he had given me in exchange for everything he had received. "Mom, fine. I haven't been the perfect son, but you haven't been the perfect mother either." Those words chilled me to the bone. "Explain. You're very intense, very clingy. You always want us to be comforting you, making you feel important. It's exhausting." Clingy, intense, exhausting. My maternal love had been reduced to these 3 cruel words. You know what, Julian? You're right. I was a terrible mother. I fed you every day for 18 years as a single mom. I bought you clothes, school supplies. I paid for your college. I helped you with your house, your car, your wife's expenses. What an awful mother I was. Don't say that. And you know what else, son? You're also right that I'm exhausting. I am exhausted. Exhausted from being your ATM. Exhausted from pretending it doesn't hurt that you see me as a burden. Exhausted from begging for scraps of affection from my own children. I stood up and went to the cabinet where I kept my important papers. I pulled out a folder and put it in front of him. "What is this?" "Documents from the lawyer. I'm changing my will." His face changed completely. The earlier desperation transformed into pure panic. "What?" "I have 5 properties, Julian. This house. The land in the hill country I bought with your father, the apartment I rent downtown, the 2 commercial lots I bought with my savings. It's all worth around $5.7 million. He had gone pale as a sheet. Mom, it was all going to be yours and Leah's. But I've been thinking, why would I leave my legacy to children who see me as pathetic and exhausting? You can't do that. I can't. It's my money, Julian. My money that I earned working since I was 15. My money that I saved penny by penny while you two spent it on nonsense. But we're your family. Family? The family that makes plans to push me away? The family that laughs at me behind my back? He dropped to his knees on the floor, literally on his knees, something he hadn't done since he was 5. Mom, please, forgive me. I'll never say anything bad about you again. I promise everything will change. You promise? Like you promised you would never leave me alone after your dad's funeral? This time is different. No, Julian. What's different is me. The phone rang. It was Leah. I put it on speaker. Mom? Julian said you're going crazy, that you're going to change the will. Please tell me it's not true. It's true. But you can't do this to us. We're your children. And what am I to you? Because according to the emails I found, I'm the pathetic old woman who doesn't notice anything. Silence on the other end. Leah, are you there? I'm here, but... Mom, those emails... We didn't mean... You didn't mean what? You didn't mean for me to find out you see me as a burden? You didn't mean for me to know you made a plan to push me away? It wasn't a plan. We were just talking. Talking about how to get rid of your mother without her noticing? Is that what you call talking? Julian was still on his knees, now crying. Tears that didn't move me because I knew they weren't of real remorse. They were from the panic of losing the money. Mom, Leah sobbed over the phone, if you change the will, what will happen to us? The same thing that's happened to me all these years will happen to you. You'll have to figure it out on your own. But we need you. You don't need me. You need my money. And the bank is closed. I hung up the phone. Julian looked up at me from the floor with a pleading face that would have melted me a week ago. But not anymore. Get up, Julian, and get out of my house. Mom, please. Leave. And the next time you come, knock on the door. This isn't your house anymore. He left crying, like a child who'd had his favorite toy taken away. But I knew he wasn't crying for losing his mother. He was crying for losing his inheritance. That night, for the first time in years, I ate in peace. No phone ringing, no guilty messages, no children needing something. It was the first day of my new life, and it felt like being born again. For the first time in decades, I woke up without the usual tightness in my chest. There were no desperate messages on the phone, no missed calls from children needing something. The silence in my house felt different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. I made myself coffee, but this time I added extra cinnamon, just how I liked it. For years, I had made it weak because Julian said it was too strong for his stomach. I had cooked without salt because Claire was on a diet. I had bought the bread Leah liked even though it tasted like cardboard to me. Now, for the first time in a long time, I did things the way I liked them. After breakfast, I did something I hadn't done since I was young. I got dressed up to go out with no particular destination. I put on my blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions, did my hair carefully, and even put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I went for a walk through my neighborhood like a tourist in my own life. I greeted Mrs. Carmen, who noticed the difference immediately. Rose, you look radiant. Did something good happen? I'm getting to know myself again, I told her. And for the first time in a long time, my smile was genuine. I walked to the park where I used to take my children when they were small. I sat on the same bench where I had spent entire afternoons watching Julian and Leah play, where I had dreamed of their bright futures, where I had planned all the sacrifices I would make for them. A little boy ran up to his grandmother, who was sitting on the next bench. "Grandma, look what I found!" he shouted excitedly, showing her a rock. The woman received him with open arms, made room for him on her lap, and told him it was the most beautiful rock she had ever seen. The boy hugged her tightly and said, "I love you, Grandma," with the pure spontaneity of children. I watched that scene, and instead of hurting, it filled me with a strange sense of peace. I understood that this was what I had been waiting for years. Real, unfeigned love, respect, not pity, genuine presence, not obligation. I returned home with a clear decision. I went to the cabinet where I kept all the family documents and took out a metal box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were all the IOUs my children had signed over the years. Loans I knew they would never pay back, but which I had documented out of habit. 43 IOUs ranging from $50 to $2,500. They added up to over $20,000 they had borrowed and never returned. $20,000 that had come from my work, my savings, my pension. I took all those papers and put them on the kitchen table. Then I took out my phone and sent a picture of the pile to each of them, with a simple message, in case you forgot how much you owe me. The reaction was immediate. Julian called within a minute. Mom, what is this? Are you going to make us pay you back? Your own children? I'm not going to make you pay, Julian. I'm going to forgive the debt. All of it. Confused silence on the other end. Really? Yes. I forgive all the loans. The $23,000 you owe me. Mom, thank you. I knew you. But on one condition. What is it? That you never ask me for money again. Not you, not your sister. It's over. You are forgiven. But you are also cut off. What do you mean cut off? You will not ask me for another penny. Not for emergencies. Not for uniforms. Not for procedures. Not for anything. The bank of Mom is closed. But that's no way to treat family. Family? The family that sees me as a walking ATM? No, Julian. Real family doesn't charge for love. Real family doesn't make plans to push their parents away. Real family doesn't pretend to like their mother's cooking. I hung up before he could respond. Leah called 5 minutes later, crying, Mom, you can't do this. We depend on your help. And I depended on my children's love. It seems we're both going to be without what we needed. But you have so much money. What we ask for is nothing to you. Is it nothing? Leah, last year I gave you over $4,000, nearly half of my annual pension. Is that nothing to you? Well, no, but it's something to me. It's the food I didn't buy for myself to give it to you. It's the clothes I didn't buy. It's the dental work I need but can't afford because all my money goes to you. Mom, we didn't know that. You didn't know because you never asked. In 30 years, have you ever once asked me if I needed anything? Silence. Have you ever asked how I was doing financially before asking me for money? More silence. Have you ever offered to help me with anything? Mom, The answer is no. Never. In 30 years you have only taken. You have never given. But we give you affection. Affection? Forgetting my birthday is affection? Not visiting me when I'm sick is affection. Making fun of me with your spouses is affection? Leah was crying on the other end, but I was no longer moved by my children's tears. I had cried too much alone for their tears to affect me. It's over, sweetie. Find another way to solve your problems. I will no longer be the solution. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. I went to the dentist. Not the cheap dentist downtown where I always went, but a private dentist in Alamo Heights that I never would have dared to enter before. How can I help you, ma'am? I want to get all my teeth fixed. I have money saved, and I want to have a nice smile again. The estimate was $3,000. The money I had given Julian last month for an emergency he never quite explained. When can we start? Next week, if you'd like. Perfect. I left the office feeling strange. I had spent money on myself for the first time in years. I felt guilty and liberated at the same time. On the way home, I stopped at a clothing store. I had seen a dress in the window that I'd liked for months. It was expensive by my usual standards, but it cost less than what I spent on my children monthly. Would you like to try it on? Yes, please. It fit perfectly. It made me look younger, more cheerful. I looked like a woman who valued herself. I'll take it. At home, I tried on the new dress in front of the wardrobe mirror. There was a woman in the reflection I hadn't seen in years. A woman who dressed up for herself, who spent money on herself, who made decisions based on her own well-being. The phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Rose Miller? Yes, this is she. This is Patricia, a teacher at Benito Juarez Elementary. You helped my mother a few years ago when she was hospitalized. Mrs. Elena, how is she? She passed away 2 months ago, ma'am. But before she died, she asked me to find you to thank you for everything you did for her. I didn't remember doing anything special. I had met Mrs. Elena in a hospital waiting room when I was there for an appointment. She was alone, scared, with no money for food. I bought her a sandwich and we became friends during the days we saw each other at the hospital. My mother told me you bought her food, you kept her company during tests, that you even paid for a medication she needed. We were never able to thank you properly. It was nothing. To us, it was everything. My mother died without any debt thanks to your help, and she died knowing there are still good people in the world. When I hung up, I cried, but not from sadness. I cried because I understood something important. I did know how to love. I did know how to give without expecting anything in return. I had done it for a stranger in a hospital. I had done it for my children for decades. The difference was that Mrs. Elena had valued it. My children had taken me for granted. That night, eating my favorite meal at my own table, using my nice dishes, watching my favorite TV show, I understood that freedom wasn't the absence of family. Freedom was the absence of those who don't value you. 3 weeks after closing the family bank, my house had become an oasis of tranquility. I had planted new flowers in the garden, rearranged the furniture to make it more comfortable for me, and started watching my soap operas without interruption. But I knew the calm was temporary. My children weren't going to give up that easily. On Sunday morning, while I was having a quiet breakfast on the patio, the storm arrived. First came Julian, then Leah with her husband Rick and their 2 children. Then Claire arrived. And finally, to my surprise, my sister-in-law Martha, Thomas's sister, showed up. She lived in Phoenix, and I hadn't seen her in 2 years. They all stood in my living room as if it were an intervention. The children ran around the house, touching my things, shouting, while the adults looked at me with somber faces. "Mom," Julian began in a solemn voice, "we came to talk to you because we're worried." "Worried about what?" "About you," Leah chimed in. "We think you're not in your right mind." Martha cleared her throat. "Rose, the kids told me what's been happening, that you changed the will, that you won't give them money anymore, that you kicked them out of the house. That's not normal." "What is normal, Martha? A mother always takes care of her children. My brother Thomas, may he rest in peace, would be rolling in his grave if he knew you were denying his children help." The mention of Thomas hurt, but not like it used to. They weren't going to blackmail me with the debt anymore. Thomas worked his whole life to leave something for them, Martha continued. And you're throwing it away over a whim. A whim? Discovering that my children make fun of me is a whim? Claire, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Rose, we all say things when we're angry. You can't destroy a family over a few comments." "A few comments?" "Claire, you made a plan to push me away. A plan. You sat down and discussed how to get rid of me without me noticing." Rick, Leah's husband, who rarely spoke, got up from the sofa. "Look, Mrs. Miller, I'm an outsider here, so I can see this objectively. The kids made mistakes. Fine. But you're overreacting. Changing the will over this? It's too drastic. And what's your opinion, Rick? That a mother doesn't do that to her children. That children will always be children no matter what they do." "Oh, really? And what are we parents? Walking ATMs who have to put up with everything?" Julian stood up, clearly frustrated. "Mom, stop it. Enough of your drama. It's always been the same with you. Always exaggerating everything. Always playing the victim." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone realized Julian had said the one thing he shouldn't have. I stood up slowly, walked to the cabinet where I kept my documents, and pulled out the lawyer's folder. "Do you know what's in here?" No one answered. My original will, the one that left everything split between Julian and Leah, $5.7 million. Everyone's eyes were glued to the folder as if hypnotized. "But my new will is in here too. Do you want to know what it says?" Martha cleared her throat. "Rose, don't do something you'll regret." "Regret? What will I regret? Leaving my money to someone who respects me instead of someone who despises me?" "We don't despise you," Leah cried out. "You're our mom." "Your mom? The mom who is pathetic but useful? The mom who makes awful greasy stew? The mom who won't notice anything because she's so naive?" I repeated their own words with an icy calm that made everyone uncomfortable. That mom? Claire tried to intervene. Rose, we can forget the past and start over. Start over? Like when you forgot my birthday? Like when you left me alone when I was sick? Like when you pretended to like my food while making fun of me on WhatsApp? I went to the kitchen and came back with a plastic bag. Inside were all the family photos I had in the house. You know what I did last week? I pulled them out of the bag one by one. I took down all the family photos from the walls. Julian turned pale. Mom, what did you do? I put them away. Because I realized those photos didn't represent good memories. They represented an illusion. The illusion that I had a family that loved me. I picked up the photo from Julian's wedding, where I was hugging him as he smiled. This picture. On your wedding day, you told me I was the most important woman in your life after Claire. Remember? Julian nodded, his eyes wet with tears. You lied. I was never important to you. I was useful. I was convenient. I was a resource. I tore the photo in half and let the pieces fall to the floor. Mom, no. Yes, Julian. Yes. The lies are over. The illusions are over. I took another photo from Leah's 8th birthday. I was holding her as she blew out the candles. This little girl used to hug me and tell me I was the best mom in the world. That little girl grew up to be a woman who only calls me when she needs money. I tore that photo too. Stop, Mom, stop! Leah cried, sobbing. Stop! No, honey. I'm just getting started. I took out my phone and found the audio files I had been saving for the past few weeks. Conversations with each of them where it was clear they only sought me out for their own gain. Want to hear this? I played the first audio file. It was Leah asking for money for the kids' vacation while telling me I was the most important person in her life. Do you recognize that voice? That's your daughter, Martha, telling me I'm the most important person in her life, while asking me for $1,000. I played the next one. Julian explaining that he needed money for the remodel because he wanted his mom to be proud of him. And this one? Your nephew Martha, emotionally manipulating me to get money out of me. Martha looked uncomfortable. Rose, we all need help sometimes. Help? Martha, in the last 5 years, have any of you ever asked me if I needed help? Silence. Have any of you ever offered to help me with anything? More silence. The answer is no. Because to you, I'm not a person with needs. I'm a resource to be exploited. Rick stood up. Ma'am, you're being very harsh. Harsh? You want to see harsh? I went to the cabinet and took out the new will, the one I had signed last week. This is harsh. I opened it and began to read. I, Rose Miller, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, valued at $5.7 million, to the San Antonio Foundation for Senior Women. Leah's scream was heartbreaking. You can't do that. That's our money. Your money? When did you work for this money? When did you get up at 4 a.m. to bake pies for this money? Julian fell to the floor again, but this time it didn't move me. I had seen him fake emotions too many times. Mom, I'm begging you. You're begging me. Like I begged you for affection for years? Like I begged you for respect? Like I begged you to see me as a person and not an ATM? Martha tried to approach me. Rose, think this through. Those women at the foundation aren't your family. And you are? The family that makes plans to push me away? The family that's ashamed of me? The family that pretends to love me only when they need money? I walked to the front door and opened it. All of you, leave. Mom, leave. My shout surprised them so much that the children stopped running and stood still. This meeting is over. My decision is made. Get out of my house and don't come back until you can see me for who I am. Your mother, not your bank. One by one, they filed out. Martha was the last. Rose, you're going to regret this. No, Martha. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to value myself. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, trembling. It had been the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most liberating. For the first time in 64 years, I had put my needs before anyone else's. And it felt like being born again. The weeks that followed that confrontation were like a new mirror in which I saw a different woman each morning. The first sensation was vertigo, as if I had jumped from a building without knowing if the ground would be there to catch my feet. But with every sunrise, the fear transformed into something unexpected. Relief. I found myself breathing more deeply, smelling the scent of my bougainvillea as if for the first time. The phone rang less, and each silence between rings was a reminder that I now decided who to open the door for, who to give my time to. I started to fill my days with things that once seemed like impossible luxuries. I signed up for a pottery workshop at the Community Arts Center. At first, my hands trembled on the wet clay, accustomed only to kneading pie dough and scrubbing floors. But soon, the clay began to obey me, allowing itself to be molded with the patience I had never had for myself. The other women in the workshop were of different ages and backgrounds. Widows, divorcees, retirees looking for something more than the silence of their homes. I felt a sense of companionship for the first time in years. They didn't ask me for money or favors. They just shared laughter, techniques to keep the clay from cracking, and recipes for strong coffee. There, no one was pathetic. We were all creators. One afternoon after class, one of the women invited me for hot chocolate at a nearby cafe. Her name was Irene, a retired teacher who had raised 3 daughters on her own. As we talked, she told me that one of her daughters stopped visiting after she decided to move in with her partner. "It's like I'm an old piece of furniture that clashes with her perfect living room," she said with a sad laugh. I felt a lump in my throat. Her words were an exact reflection of my own life. We ended up sharing stories of absence and broken promises, and for the first time, I was able to say out loud that I had changed my will. Irene didn't look at me with judgment, but with a kind of respect. "That's self-love too, Rose. Sometimes you have to bequeath dignity to yourself," she murmured. While my inner world blossomed, my children seemed to be sinking into their own whirlwind. Not a day went by without new messages arriving. Some were pleas. "Mom, forgive us. We need to talk." Others were thinly veiled demands. "You can't just break the family apart like this." There were also calls from unknown numbers that I recognized by the anxious tone of Julian or Leah when they left voicemails. I listened to them in silence, with a mixture of sadness and resolve I had never experienced before. The love for them was still there, an underground river, but I finally understood that loving was not the same as enabling. One Saturday morning, as I was finishing painting a vase at the workshop, I received a text from Julian that made me frown. "We need to see you. It's urgent. Please don't say no." Something in those words didn't sound like reconciliation, but like a strategy. Still, I decided to reply with a curt, "You can come Tuesday at 4. Just you and Leah. No one else." I didn't want any surprises or an invasion of relatives repeating the last spectacle. Tuesday arrived with a gray sky and a wind that rattled the windows. I made strong coffee and placed 2 chairs at the table, nothing more. When the doorbell rang, I opened it calmly. Julian and Leah were there, looking more haggard than I remembered. His hair was messy, with dark circles under his eyes. She was biting her lip, holding back what I couldn't tell was anger or tears. "Thanks for seeing us, Mom," Julian said, avoiding my gaze. I nodded and sat down without inviting them to do the same. They could decide for themselves. They settled in front of me, uncertain. "Mom," Leah began, "we didn't come to fight. We came to understand." Her voice trembled. "I can't stop thinking about what you said, about the foundation, about everything. I feel like we lost you." "You didn't lose me," I replied slowly. "I just stopped being available for you to use." Julian looked down. His hands fidgeted with a napkin he had taken from the table. "I admit that what we did was wrong," he finally said. "The emails, the jokes, the distance. There's no excuse. But you're our mother. We don't know how to fix what we broke." I looked at him for a long time. I saw the boy who had once promised he would always be by my side, and also the man who had called me pathetic. The 2 images overlapped. Impossible to separate. "This isn't about fixing me," I answered. "It's about fixing yourselves. I already did my part. I raised you, educated you, helped you more than I could afford. Now it's your turn to learn to live without me as your safety net." Leah broke down crying, a deep sob that seemed to come from years of silence. Julian looked at her helpless. I felt a pang of compassion, but I remained firm. I want you to understand something, I continued. The will is already signed. My decision doesn't depend on how much you beg. It's not a punishment. It's a consequence. For years, you ignored my voice, my needs, my birthdays, my health. I've also learned to ignore your needs when they're only about money. Julian took a deep breath, as if each word was a weight. Mom, I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try. Even if you don't leave me a dime, even if we never get back what we had, I want to be present. I want my kids to know their grandmother for real, not the caricature I made of you. His words surprised me. They weren't a plea for money. At least they didn't sound like it. There was a crack of honesty in his voice. I looked at him without responding. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe it was another tactic. Time would tell. Me too, Leah added through her sobs. I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking her grandmother is just a bank account. I was wrong. We were wrong. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Outside, the wind blew dry leaves against the door. I felt a slight tremor in my chest, a mix of pain and hope. But this wasn't the time for hugs or instant forgiveness. Listen carefully, I said finally. I love you. I will always love you. But love isn't a checkbook. If you want to be in my life, come without expecting anything material. Not a dollar, not an inheritance. Just sincere company. If you can't handle that, then it's better if you don't come at all. They nodded in silence. There were no promises, no I swear, no soap opera scenes, just a tacit agreement that the relationship, if it were to continue, would have to be born again, clean of self-interest. When they left, the air in the house felt lighter, as if a necessary storm had passed. I sat for a long time, listening to the echo of their footsteps fading away. I didn't know if they would come back, or under what conditions, but for the first time, I understood that my peace of mind didn't depend on them. That night, I lit a candle in front of the photo of Thomas that I still kept in my room. I spoke to him in a low voice, telling him everything, just as I used to when he was alive. I told him that while loneliness sometimes hurt, it was also a space of power. That I had finally understood that to love doesn't mean to sacrifice yourself until you disappear. That our greatest inheritance to our children isn't houses or dollars, but the example of living with dignity. As the candle burned down, I felt the fear that had accompanied me my whole life melt away, little by little, like wax. I didn't know what the future held with my children, but for the first time, that future, whatever it might be, belonged only to me. The next day dawned with a clear blue sky that made the bougainvillea shine. I woke up early, more out of habit than necessity, and was surprised to realize that my first thought wasn't of my children, or the phone, or the monthly bills. I thought about myself, about the coffee I wanted to make, the book I'd left half read, the walk I could take before the sun got too hot. It was a new feeling, almost childlike, as if the world had expanded after decades of shrinking around the needs of others. I decided to visit the local farmers market, a place I used to frequent when Thomas was alive, and had avoided in recent years for lack of time or desire. I walked among the fruit stands, greeted vendors who still remembered me, and tasted a slice of mango with chili lime seasoning that took me back to my youth. I bought fresh flowers for the house and, on impulse, a pair of silver bracelets that shone like little promises on my wrists. For me, I murmured, and the simple act of saying it out loud filled me with a serene joy. Returning home, I found a letter in the mailbox. The envelope had my name written on it by hand, in a script I recognized immediately. Julian's. I opened it with my heart in my throat. It wasn't a plea or a veiled threat. It was a brief letter, written with the awkwardness of someone who doesn't know how to ask for forgiveness. Mom, I'm trying to be better. Not for the money, but because I truly miss you. Today I took my kids to the park and told them about when you used to take me as a boy. I realized how much I owe you that has nothing to do with money. If you'll let me, I'd like to visit on Sunday, just to share a coffee. No strings attached. I put the letter in my nightstand drawer. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to let the words settle, like letting dough rest before baking. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was the director of the San Antonio Foundation for Senior Women, the organization I had decided to leave my estate to. She invited me to visit the facilities and meet the women who lived there. I accepted almost without thinking. The following Saturday, a volunteer driver picked me up. When I arrived, I was greeted by a modest but bright building, with walls painted in lively colors and a courtyard full of laughter. I was introduced to several women. Soledad, who had raised 6 children who now lived out of state and never visited. Marina, a former nurse who had spent her old age caring for others until she had no strength or visitors left. Teresa, who lost her house after being scammed by a nephew. Each story was a mirror of my own, but also a reminder that I was not alone in my experience. We spent hours talking, sharing anecdotes, recipes, broken dreams, and belated hopes. I felt an immediate connection, a silent sisterhood that needed no explanation. As we said our goodbyes, the director took my hands and said, "Your decision to support us isn't just generous, it's brave. You give us dignity and hope." I left with a full heart and a renewed certainty. My inheritance, the fruit of years of sacrifice, would be used to build something worthwhile beyond blood ties. On Sunday, just as he had promised in his letter, Julian arrived alone, without Claire, without the kids, without gifts. He held a bag of pastries from the market, the same kind we used to buy when he was little. I invited him in, noticing the tension in his shoulders. We sat in the kitchen, and for long minutes, the only sound was the whistling of the coffee pot. "Thanks for coming," I finally said. "Thanks for letting me in," he replied, in a low voice I didn't recognize. We talked about simple things at first. The weather, a football game, a movie he'd seen. Then, slowly, the conversation deepened. Julian confessed he had started therapy, that a friend had recommended he confront his fear of failure and his need to project success. He told me that the pressure of work, debts, and his wounded pride had led him to treat me like a nuisance. "It's not an excuse, Mom. It's just, I never learned how to tell you I felt small next to you. You were always stronger than me." Hearing that surprised me. I had always seen myself as fragile, worn down by life. Perhaps, for my son, my resilience had cast too long a shadow. I felt a gentle warmth in my chest, a new understanding. I didn't absolve him, but I didn't reject him either. "I don't know if we can go back," I told him, "but we can start again in a different way, without lies, without obligations." He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, he looked me in the eye without hurry or shame. As he left, Julian hugged me. It was a different kind of hug, not that of a needy child or a guilty adult, but that of a man who recognizes his mother's strength. We didn't talk about money or inheritance, just about seeing each other again next week to walk in the park together. Leah took a little longer to reach out. A week later, I received a video call. Her face looked tired, but there was a new light in her eyes. She told me she had started tutoring to support her family without relying on me. "Mom, I was so scared when you said you wouldn't help us anymore, but that fear made me take action. Rick got a temp job too. I think for the first time, we're learning to stand on our own 2 feet." Her words, far from hurting, filled me with a pride I hadn't felt since my children were small. Perhaps by removing the safety net, I had given them the chance to fly. The days began to fill with different kinds of visits. Irene took me to an art exhibit. Mrs. Carmen and I hosted a potluck for the neighbors. The foundation director invited me to volunteer in cooking workshops for the new residents. I found myself telling stories, teaching recipes, sharing laughs with strangers who, little by little, became my chosen family. That word, family, began to take on a new meaning. Not the family of blood that demands and wounds, but the family of ties one chooses to weave with care and respect. One Friday afternoon, while shaping a new pot at the workshop, I received another letter from Julian. This time, it included a drawing from my grandchildren. Me, surrounded by flowers, with a sign that said, "We love you, Grandma." I cried, not from sadness, but from an unexpected tenderness. I understood that perhaps, with time, the wounds could heal. But now, unlike in the past, I didn't need them to heal to feel whole. That night, I lit the candle in front of Thomas's photo again. I told him about the small changes, the new friendships, the strength I had discovered in myself. I told him our children were learning, that I was too, and that, although the road back to a healthy relationship would be long, I was no longer afraid to walk it. Because I had finally understood that the true inheritance I could leave them wasn't money, but the example of a woman who, even after a lifetime of sacrifices, had the courage to choose her own peace. The days began to pass with a calmness I never would have imagined. Each dawn brought a new silence, not of loneliness, but of space for myself. In the mornings, I continued my coffee routine, now more aromatic and thick, and then I would walk through the streets of the King William district, observing the old facades that seemed to greet me like old friends. Sometimes I would stop in front of the newly painted murals and think about how much of the world I had missed by being trapped in the habit of giving and expecting nothing. Now, time belonged to me. The pottery workshop had become the center of my week. There I felt part of something alive. Women sharing stories, jokes, recipes, and above all, a silent understanding. One afternoon, while I was shaping a vase I wanted to give to the foundation, Irene told me that her daughters had started visiting more frequently since she set boundaries. Maybe when we stop begging, they learn to appreciate, she said, and those words resonated in my mind. Perhaps love also needed distance to breathe. Julian's messages became more infrequent, less anxious. He would send me photos of his kids playing in the park, small details from his day, a loaf of bread he had baked, a new plant in his house. He never asked for money or favors. He just shared. It was as if we were rediscovering a different kind of relationship, one based on simple gestures and not obligations. Leah, for her part, began calling me every Sunday to tell me about her work at school. Her conversations were different too. No complaints about money or veiled pleas, just stories about her students and plans for the future. One morning, while watering the bougainvillea, I received an unexpected call from the foundation director. "Rose, we're opening a new space for workshops and we'd like you to cut the ribbon. Your donation made this possible." I felt a lump in my throat. I accepted, with the mix of pride and humility that had been with me for the last few months. I picked out a simple but elegant dress, and that Saturday I went to the inauguration. There was music, laughter, and elderly women smiling with gratitude. When they handed me the scissors to cut the ribbon, I saw the bright eyes of so many who, like me, had been invisible for years. As I cut the ribbon, I felt something inside me close and open at the same time, a cycle of pain transforming into a legacy. After the ceremony, several women came up to thank me. One of them, Teresa, hugged me tightly. "Thanks to you, we're not sleeping on the streets anymore. Here, we're people again." Her words made me think of my own children, of how I myself had spent so long not feeling like a person. I left the foundation with a heart full of a kind of love that doesn't demand, a love that simply exists. When I got home, I found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Julian. "Mom, I'd like to take you to dinner next week. Just you and me. No difficult conversations, just sharing a meal like we used to." I hesitated. Part of me feared it was an attempt to talk about the inheritance, about money, but another part, the one that still loved without reservation, wanted to believe in his sincerity. I accepted with a short message. "Okay, son. Thursday at 7. Thursday arrived with a cool breeze. I put on the blue dress that made me feel confident and my mother's pearl earrings. Julian was waiting for me at a simple restaurant, not one of those places where he used to be ashamed of me. When he saw me, he stood up and hugged me without a word. During dinner, we talked about memories, his childhood, afternoons in the park, the stories I used to tell him. He didn't mention money or inheritance or guilt. He just talked about us. He told me he had started saving for his children's college, and that for the first time in years, he felt he could handle his own responsibilities. "I want my kids to know who you really are, Mom," he said. "The strong woman who taught me never to give up." Those words struck me with a mix of pain and pride. I didn't reply with grand speeches. A smile and a squeeze of his hand were enough. When I got home, I had a message from Leah. "Mom, I've been thinking about visiting for Christmas. I want my kids to spend a few days with you. No strings attached, just to be together." A warmth spread through me. Perhaps the changes in me were planting something in them, a seed of respect that was finally beginning to sprout. The days leading up to Christmas were a mix of nostalgia and excitement. I decorated the house with lights and candles, not to impress anyone, but because it made me happy. I cooked my favorite stew, the one Julian had once called greasy, but which I now prepared with a serene pride. Mrs. Carmen came over to help, and we spent hours laughing like two teenagers. On the 24th, Leah arrived with her children. They brought gifts wrapped in colorful paper, not expensive, but handmade. Drawings, cookies, a small embroidered tablecloth. Julian arrived later with his family. Seeing them walk in, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. It wasn't the triumphant return one imagines, but it was a beginning. We had dinner together. No one mentioned the will or money. We just talked about memories, simple plans, anecdotes from the kids' school. When my grandchildren hugged me to wish me, "Merry Christmas, Grandma," I understood that something had truly changed. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the living room, illuminated by the lights of the tree. Instead of the usual sadness, I felt a deep peace. I understood that my decision to set boundaries hadn't destroyed my family. It was rebuilding it from a healthier place. I didn't know if the old wounds would ever fully heal, but now that didn't matter. I had reclaimed my life, and in doing so, I had taught my children that true love isn't bought or demanded. It's cultivated with respect. Before going to sleep, I lit the candle in front of Thomas's photo. "Mission accomplished, old man," I whispered. "Our children are finally learning what it means to truly love." As the flame danced, I felt that at last, the home we had dreamed of so much had been found. Not within the walls of this house, but in the quiet strength that now lived in my heart. The dawn of the new year came with a different air, as if the sky itself wanted to remind me that every cycle can begin anew. I woke up early, to the gentle ringing of bells from the nearby church. I made my coffee, added an extra dash of cinnamon, and poured it into my favorite mug, the one I had made in the pottery workshop. As I drank, I watched the bougainvillea-filled patio swaying in the wind and thought about how much my life had changed in just a few months. I was no longer the woman who waited for a phone call to feel alive. Now, every day held its own meaning. The first text of the day was from Julian. "Happy New Year, Mom. Thanks for Christmas dinner. The kids can't stop talking about you." I smiled. I didn't reply right away. I let the warmth of those words stay with me for a while. A little later, Leah wrote, "Mom, I want to visit more this year. I realized I truly miss you." I replied with a simple, "I'll be here whenever you want to come," without promises or conditions. I decided to start the year with a long walk through the city. I crossed the park, greeted vendors who now knew me, bought a bag of tamarind candy, and stopped to watch a group of street musicians playing Tejano music. I felt the music in my bones, a rhythm that reminded me I was alive. On an impulse, I left a generous tip in the violinist's hat. "Thank you, ma'am," he said with a smile that brightened my day. When I returned home, I found a letter in the mailbox. It was from the foundation's director. She was inviting me to participate in a new project, a mentorship program for young women who had aged out of the foster care system. They wanted me to tell my story and teach the skills I had learned over years of work, from cooking to managing a small budget. I felt a flutter in my chest. It was a chance to transform my experience into something useful for others, to turn my pain into a seed. I accepted without hesitation. The first session was a mix of nerves and excitement. I found myself in front of a group of girls between 15 and 20, each with a look that mixed fear and hope. I told them about my life, how I started working at 15, the sacrifices to educate my children, the nights I cried in silence. I didn't hide the end, how I had learned to set boundaries, to reclaim my dignity. When I finished, one of them, named Camila, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Rose, thank you. I thought being alone was the end, but now I see it can be a beginning." Her hug filled me with a warmth that no inheritance could buy. As my world expanded, I also noticed changes in my children. Julian started visiting every 2 weeks, always spontaneously and without expectations. Sometimes he brought pastries, other times just his company. He talked about his projects, how he was paying off his own debts, his effort to be a present father. I listened, surprised by the maturity that was beginning to show. One afternoon, over coffee, he told me, "Mom, I've thought a lot about what you did. At first, I was angry, but now I understand you taught us a lesson. You forced me to grow up." His words moved me more than I let on. Leah began to transform as well. She called to tell me about her classes, her children's progress, the small daily victories of not depending on my financial support. "Mom, I got a raise. I'm not afraid of not making rent anymore," she told me proudly one day. I felt that somehow my decision to cut them off had been the best gift I could have given them. In mid-February, the foundation held a fundraising event. They asked me to give a speech. I went up to the small stage with my heart beating fast. In front of me were dozens of people: senior women, young people in search of a home, volunteers, neighbors. I told my story without embellishment, with the naked truth of the years. I spoke of loneliness, of silent betrayal, of the strength I discovered when I learned to say no. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. I saw tears in many eyes, but also smiles of recognition. In that moment, I knew my voice had a purpose greater than the pain that had created it. That night, when I got home, I found Julian waiting for me on the porch. He didn't have flowers or gifts, just a serene expression. "Mom, I saw you at the event. I didn't want to interrupt, but I was there. I'm proud of you." He hugged me, and I felt something between us settle. Not like before, but in a new, adult way. We didn't ask for forgiveness or make promises. We just stood in silence, sharing a moment that was worth more than any inheritance. The following months were a succession of small discoveries. I enrolled in a literature course at the public library. I started writing my memoirs, not to publish them, but to leave a record of my journey. Sometimes Julian would ask to read excerpts and would ask questions that revealed a genuine interest in my life. Leah, for her part, sent me pictures of her kids drawing Grandma Rose with red hearts. Each image was a reminder that love, when freed from the weight of money, can bloom again. One day in April, while working at the pottery workshop, I got an unexpected call from Claire, Julian's wife. Her voice sounded different, less cold. "Mrs. Rose, I wanted to apologize. I let my prejudices and fear get the better of me. Julian has told me everything that happened, and I'm ashamed of the way I treated you." I listened in silence. I hadn't expected the call, and I didn't need her forgiveness to move on, but her words were a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Claire," I replied calmly. "Let's move forward." That was all that was needed. In May, the foundation invited me to lead a cooking workshop. I prepared my famous stew, the same one Julian had once called greasy. The young women tasted it enthusiastically, asking for the recipe. "It tastes like home," one of them said. I smiled, remembering my children's mockery, and I realized that this dish wasn't just food. It was memory, identity, self-love. My children's visits became routine, but of a different kind. They would arrive unannounced, expecting nothing. Sometimes they brought the grandkids to play in the yard. Other times, they just sat with me to watch the sunset. There was a new respect in them, an acceptance that I was no longer an inexhaustible resource, but a person with her own world. One afternoon in June, Julian surprised me by saying, "Mom, if you ever decide to change the will, do it only because you want to, not because of us. We've understood that the most valuable thing you're leaving us is your example." His words, so different from the desperate pleas of before, made me feel that the cycle of learning was complete. That night, as I watered the plants under the moonlight, I thought of Thomas. I looked at the starry sky and felt his serene presence. "We did it, old man," I whispered. Our children learned, and I did too. The warm San Antonio air enveloped me like a hug. For the first time in my life, I understood that true wealth isn't measured in millions of dollars, but in the ability to live with a peaceful heart, surrounded by people who choose to be there, not those who stay out of obligation. The summer heat gradually softened, and with it, I felt the last layer of resentment I had carried for so many years also fade away. My house, once painfully quiet, had filled with a different kind of music. The laughter of neighbors stopping by for coffee, The patter of grandchildren's feet running through the yard, the murmur of my own voice as I read aloud from the memoirs I was finishing. It was a new life, woven with threads I had chosen myself. In August, the foundation held a special event to thank its benefactors. They asked me to speak again, this time to a larger audience. I walked onto the stage with a calm heart. I told them how a woman who thought she was destined to be invisible had discovered that her story could give strength to others. As I spoke, I saw Julian, Leah, and their children in the crowd. They were smiling. There was no shame in their eyes, only pride. I felt an emotion so profound I had to pause for a moment to breathe. After the event, Julian approached with the children and hugged me. "Mom, I understood something today. Your value isn't in what you gave us, but in who you are. Thank you for teaching us respect." Leah, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "I'm sorry for making you feel small. Now I know what it means to truly love." I didn't reply with grand words. I simply hugged them back, feeling every crack from the past sealing, not through forgetting, but through learning. The following months flowed with a naturalness I had never known. Julian invited me for a walk in the park every Sunday. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with his kids, who now sought me out to tell me about their school adventures. Leah and her family would spend weekends at my house, helping me tend the garden or cook meals. There were no more requests for money, only shared moments. Even Claire started visiting from time to time, bringing desserts she had baked herself. Her gesture, shy but sincere, was a silent apology I accepted without resentment. One evening in November, as I was watering the bougainvillea, Julian sat beside me with a moving serenity. "Mom, I want you to know that whatever happens with your will, we're okay. The important thing is having you, not what you can leave us." Leah, who was listening from the doorway, added, "What you've already given us is priceless. The lesson of dignity and self-love." Those words were the true gift I had waited for my entire life. We celebrated Christmas all together, but this time at my house, by their choice. I cooked my favorite stew, the same one they had once scorned, and everyone praised it sincerely. The grandchildren ran through the yard, lit up by lights Julian had hung without my asking. Leah took care of dessert, and Claire helped set the table. Amid the laughter and toasts, I felt Thomas's presence, like a warm sigh caressing my memory. I knew that somehow he was celebrating with us too. After everyone had gone, I sat alone in the living room for a moment. I lit a candle in front of my husband's photo and thought about the journey, the years of sacrifice, the pain of being used, the courage to set boundaries, the surprise of seeing respect reborn. I looked around, my house full of life, my heart at peace. I smiled. The lesson I learned, and that I now share with you, is simple and profound. True love isn't measured in blind sacrifices or money, but in the respect we have for ourselves. Setting boundaries doesn't destroy a family, it saves it. Only when we value ourselves do others learn to value us. Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach those who need it most.